The simple lesson I learned is you can't export what you're not good at in the home market. Most companies fail in their home market and think, oh, why don't I just, export a few more units? Right? No one wants to buy a weakness.
IT and BPM industry is not a 100-year-old, sector. However, over the last decade or so, it has grown to become a key sector for the country.
The world is getting highly polarized. Apple is 3 trillion. Right? As a country, we are 80 billion.
Today, Sri Lanka powers some of the world's top brands. If you look at eBay, is the middleware is powered by Sri Lankan software. London Stock Exchange, their trading platform, the development, and it's powered by Sri Lankan software.
How critical is it to attract talent and retain them? Because for services as well as manufacturing, you need talent and to grow, to innovate.
Producing global talent, empowering them, giving them the freedom to think, improving our culture of work, making sure that there is an education system that actually, builds cutting-edge talent. This is probably the foundation of, global competitiveness. There's nothing else. Now is the time for us to relook at the, dynamics of the markets, look at how we are actually going to assemble ourselves as new supply chains and offer better features to our customers.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Market Vibes organized by CS Sri Lanka. In today's session, we'll focus on exports and its importance on the Sri Lankan economy. And I'm Rajendra Uswata, and I'll be your host for the session. I would like to begin by introducing our two eminent business leaders who have graciously accepted our invitation to be with us today. We have Dilan Gooneratne. He's the founder and managing director of InQube Global, which is an innovation and design-driven global apparel company headquartered in Sri Lanka. Prior to starting his entrepreneurial journey, he was a member of the MAS Apparel Board, managing director for Bodyline and Intimates Fashion India. He also held leadership roles in diverse industries, including manufacturing, real estate, FMCG, and advertising. We also have with us Nishan Mendis. He's the incumbent chair of SLASSCOM, which represents the IT and BPM sectors in Sri Lanka. He currently also serves as the Technology and Transformation Leader and Chief Information Officer for Deloitte in Sri Lanka and Maldives. Thank you both for being here today to share our knowledge and unique perspectives from manufacturing and the service sector. Nishan, I'll start off with you. Can you share your thoughts on the pivotal role that the export industry plays in driving Sri Lanka's growth?
Thank you, Rajendra, for having me here on this exciting session. Delighted to be here. To answer your question, I think for any country, exports is absolutely essential for the economic development or economic growth of the country. Right? So, if you look at Sri Lanka, it's even more important since we are having a limited market in Sri Lanka, because we are a small country, it's a limited market. And any country who wants to grow and thrive will have to actually look beyond the geographical boundaries of Sri Lanka. If you look at the recent economic crisis that we all went through, it would have occurred due to so many, many reasons. But if you drill down, or if you look at the final outcome of it, it's basically we ended up, having a shortfall of foreign exchange. Right? So we had petrol queues, we had the lack of medicine, lack of essential items, food items. So all because we didn't have enough foreign exchange to pay for the. And it also created a lot of pressure on our currency, and that basically resulted in the rupee getting depreciated, food prices going up because imports were expensive, and we had an unprecedented inflation of about 70%. Right. So if you really look at it, although we call it the economic crisis, it was it was almost a kind of a foreign exchange crisis that we faced. So which shows us how important foreign exchange is for a country, and how you earn that is the major source of that, the major way of earning foreign exchange is through exports. So having said that, uh, for for a strong, export-oriented economy, or rather, an export-oriented economy will help a country in several ways. One of the ways is actually it will provide the much needed foreign currency for the country, and that will actually help to stabilize, your country's currency, and also ease the balance of payment pressures of the current. And then on the other hand, it will also boost the economic growth. It will help you to create jobs. It will improve your productivity. When I say productivity, why? Because when you have mass production, economies of scale will come into play. You will be exposed to global competition, which will again, will not give you an option but to improve your productivity, and also it will basically foster innovation, right? So if you look at all these, these are the factors that will really help how the foreign exchange or the export oriented economy will help a country. Having said that, I would also like to kind of give you some statistics of how Sri Lanka is faring on exports. Right? So if you look at our peer countries in the region and export as a percentage of GDP, right? So I will just share some statistics. Thailand, it's 65%. Right? So what it means is if you earn $100 of or $100 of GDP, you get 65 out of that from your exports. Cambodia, it's 60%. Taiwan, 65%. Malaysia, 70%. And Vietnam, it's almost 100%, right? Almost 100% of your GDP comes from exports. But if you look at Sri Lanka, it's 22%, right? So which shows that, that we really need to focus on our exports, be it goods or be it services. But overall, there's no doubt that we need to focus on our exports, because that's going to give you the much needed foreign currency and stabilize your economy.
Thanks, Isha. So, Dilan, moving on to you. I think the geopolitical dynamics are changing, right? We have wars in Russia, Ukraine. You have economic tensions in the Middle East, and you have, political shifts around the world. How do you see these global disruptions impacting Sri Lankan manufacturers?
So I think if you pull back a little bit, I think for the last 40 years, the world has been chasing free trade, the WTO era. Like you correctly pointed out, I think it's fairly clear that that era is coming to an end. Um, the rise of China essentially has kind of warped the trade environment for the world. I think as we look at it now, and frankly, it's not new news, because uh, coming straight from a first Trump presidency, the Biden administration has followed through on some of the similar policies, and essentially there's a new polarity in terms of how the world views alliances, and this creates its own view of what happens to supply chains. I think the easier way to look at this is to try and assume, and I want to be fairly careful, because try and assume that this automatically gives us dividends. The fact that there are supply chain shifts taking place, and that we would be benefited in market share terms. At least if I look at for the major industries which are non-commodity led, the world works with fairly, or at least global trade, works with fairly advanced players. Most of the bigger industries, most of the bigger brands and businesses have strategic partners. These partners already tend to be global in nature. And frankly, they got the message 8 years ago. So when we look at the world and assume that, suddenly there's a dividend coming our way, I wouldn't be so quick to assume that it's going to be a windfall. Because there are countries and then there are global companies. And these companies are also pretty advanced in their own strategic thinking. And they have put in place, and I'm not saying there is no dividend. I'm just saying that, we should not be laissez-faire in assuming that our geographic position or the fact that, we are out of that mix is immediately going to allow us to grow. So the growth for us as a country, and I think this theme will follow, for me at least, is not only going to be the fact that there are macroeconomic changes that are taking place, but also how we kind of rise to the occasion in terms of the competitiveness of the business models we offer, the competitive advantage of the Sri Lankan companies going in, right, and how competent we are in providing these features and strategic solutions to our buyers and our customers wherever they are in the world. So I think there are dividends, but I almost would say that most of that's already been priced in, right? Most of it has been priced in. We're playing with global players who are quite advanced in their game. You will see players moving into Sri Lanka, so there will be a country level advantage that is potential. But I think at the same time, as companies, we can't take it lightly.
So I think you covered the positive aspects of the all the adversities that are happening. If I flip it onto the other side and say, okay, especially on supply chain and especially being a manufacturer locally, yeah, majority of our input materials are coming from various countries, and sometimes some of those countries may be affected by these. That makes manufacturing from Sri Lanka tougher. How do you suggest navigating these challenges, Dylan? Because I think one is we need to be dynamic, we need to be versatile. But what mindset changes do you need to succeed in this volatile supply chain disrupted world?
So again, if you look at it at a high level, there is opportunity and risk,
Yeah.
right? Opportunity in terms of new product markets that we have access to. And I repeat, I keep going back to finally the business model and the business strategy, right? So we can't be good at everything. If Nishan quoted some statistics. At the end of the day, we have roughly $13 billion worth of exports, $5 billion in clothing, probably even less than that. If you look at, and I'm going to put things in perspective, if you look at the rise of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang's personal wealth has grown more than our entire exports, right? So I think we're in a world where, the rest of the world and competitive advantage, business models, technology is advancing at that rate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, sometimes we think too small.
Yeah.
Right. We think too small because if a company can grow at that pace, we're sitting here wondering how to go 3 to 5% of our economy and our export industry, and we are trying to leverage business models which are ancient, right? So if you then look at it and say, okay, if you were to look at it from an incumbent perspective, strategic partnerships, JVs, alliances, there's many ways to reconstruct your supply chain and to bring advantages. And I think companies need to think like that. Industries need to think like that. And I think the windows are open for us to think. And that's, I would still think that that's level one competitive advantage. That's not the end game for us. I think you represent an industry that's making significant gains. And, my own view of it is we're still thinking very small. When you look at exports, especially in our industry, in goods and services, it's a globalized supply chain already, right? And in this shift, if you look at technological advantage tends to come through verticality. So we need to have a mindfulness of how we're actually bringing greater capability and coalescing it into business models that have an opportunity to do better. So thinking of markets as being constant, and I talk about product markets here, thinking of markets as being constant, frankly, is not going to attract a premium, right? So now is the time for us to relook at the dynamics of the markets, look at how we are actually going to assemble ourselves as new supply chains and offer better features to our customers, right? And if you summarize, there are three advantages, right? If you look at it, features, cost, speed, right? So from a features perspective, you better be clear exactly what your business strategies, what are you going to offer? The world does not need another supplier that's selling yesterday. All the big guys already have efficient models of yesterday product, right? So if you're coming in, then what's your advantage? What's your strategy? What are you building? That determines the supply chain partnerships that you will need to build.
Thanks, Dylan. So Nishan, moving back to you. Previously, you were speaking about how important the export sector is for Sri Lanka. So on that note, what unique advantages do service exports in particular offer for the Sri Lankan economy?
Sure, Adinta. So before addressing your question, let me take a minute and focus on where we stand as a country, where we stand today. Uh, we are still going through some economic challenges, not yet out of the woods, which means that companies are finding it difficult, or other companies will be cautious when they invest heavily on infrastructure. However, we have a very strong, talented workforce in Sri Lanka. And if you look at our human capital indexes, we are doing much better than, our peer countries. Uh, if you look at our literacy rates, we have been maintaining high literacy rates. And we also have a growing talent pool. When I say growing, especially in the areas of IT, engineering, finance. So we have a growing workforce. However, we are a small country, less space, uh, limited number of workforce we have. Although we have a strong workforce, it's limited, which means that we need to make the best use of the talent that we have, and we need to focus on niche areas, high-end kind of work, uh, which means we need to play not on quantity but on quality and niche areas. If you look at the strategic location of Sri Lanka, we are located in a way that we can serve both the Western and Eastern time zones. So given these unique characteristics, and then if you look at the imperatives or the requirements of service exports, it makes perfect sense for us to focus on services exports. Let me give you some, examples why I'm saying that. If you look at capital investments in service exports, it's much less capital investments that you need when you compare that with goods exports, because you don't need to have the machinery, the equipment, the factories. You don't need to have those, and you don't need to have physical infrastructure. You can even uh, serve your clients remotely. You can work from home. If you are a 10-member companies, we have that in the IT industry. Some small companies, you can actually work from home, right? You don't necessarily have to have even an office, right? But of course, when you grow, you need to, have an office and all that. But then you can start a small outfit, and you can actually earn, good export revenue. And if you look at scaling up, right, it's very easy for you to scale up. Today, you can be a 50-member company, and down the line in 6 months' time, you can actually increase it to a 200-member company without putting a lot of effort. Because even as I said, machinery, equipment, you don't need to you don't have that, right? So it's very easy to scale up, and also the opportunity for you to move up the value chain, right? So with the same number of employees, you can actually, if you move up the value chain, you can earn much higher revenue. If you look at the rate of revenue that you earn for a unit of service that you provide, it will be much higher, right, with the same number of employees. And then, especially in the case of IT and BPM, highly paid jobs, right, which will be a direct impact on the economy. And also, if you look at trade and non-trade barrier, right, it's very minimum compared to goods export, because you don't have tariffs, you don't have custom, regulations, you don't have border controls, you don't have to worry about your packaging compliance and all that. So if you look at trade and non-trade barriers are much less in service exports. And also, the global demand for services is growing at a much higher pace than the demand for goods, right? So when you look at all this, uh, you know, it makes perfect sense for you to actually focus on, or rather, service exports will give you unique advantages, and that makes sense. It makes sense for you to focus on service. I'm not saying not to focus on or prioritize goods. What I'm saying is, services as against compared to goods, it has its own unique advantages.
So, Dilan, getting back to you, right? So on one hand, you mentioned that global competition is increasing. On the other hand, consumer expectation is evolving, right? So ESG and ethical sourcing have become increasingly important to consumers. How prepared do you feel Sri Lankan manufacturers are to sort of deal with this emerging trend?
I think, look, I can speak for our industry. And I think if we start with that perspective, we probably pioneered this a little bit before the rest of the world. The main point here that I think I'd pull back and talk about is that when we speak ESG, sometimes we get misled to assume that ESG is at the heart of business strategy, right? It is and it isn't. I think we all have responsibilities for the planet, for our countries, for our, for our communities, and how we do business. And I think beyond that, you also spoke about markets evolving. I don't think, let's take Tesla for example. Electric cars were around for 40 years. Frankly, the very first car that was ever made was an electric car before even internal combustion engines were introduced. But none of them were adequately attractive to the consumer for it to ever catch on. And what Musk did was that he built an electric car that could go from 0 to 100 faster than a combustion car, which was more silent than a combustion car, which needed less maintenance than a combustion car, and was more attractive to the consumer, but was also more sustainable to the planet, right? And I think that is essentially the challenge that is thrown to every company on the planet, right? Whether you're Sri Lankan or whether you're any other country. And I think so at the core of this is a business strategy question and a business model question. And markets are evolving. Consumers have problems, one of which is how do we actually build these products in a sustainable way? How do we not harm the planet in such a way? Traceability takes a huge role now, right? So there is a huge movement and a huge requirement in terms of supplying global markets and accounting for the manner in which you behave both ethically as well as in terms of your materials, your chemicals, and your make methods. So in that environment, yes, our businesses have to be compliant. There's also a huge opportunity, as I said, for us to leap strategy. If you look at, I think we're a young country, right? When I say we're not a young country, but we're certainly a young industry in many ways. We have, for us to grow, if you look at Sri Lankan, since we keep talking about exports, it's clothing, it's tea, it's, rubber, and you add all of this up, you get to 20 billion, right? This is not going to be enough for us to, if we project our country forward by 10 years and, are we going to be able to buy our kids an AI tablet of the future by selling more tea and more rubber and whatever, right? When the rest of the world is competing in AI and building products of that value, right? Can we increase our agriculture by 10% and actually increase the quality of life of it? Not enough. So the real asset for a small country like us is between our ears. Are we actually producing talent? Are we thinking about business and building business models that are global in nature, right? Do they have global competitive advantage? Are people thinking about ideas that are, global in nature, and are we providing them an environment to scale these ideas to this? And my pet countries obviously are Singapore and Israel and countries like that, which are extremely small, but at the end of the day are punching 10 times above their weight. So for us to think small, it's just not good enough, right? And I think exports is almost the wrong word. It's actually inspiring our young people and our businesses and our talent to actually build global business models, which may start from Sri Lanka, but have to be global in its outlook in terms of the solutions they provide, and then hopefully bring resources and wealth back to this country to reinvest in tomorrow.
So I think if you take the last two questions that you spoke about, majority, but you were saying was talent, right? I mean, we discussed going beyond local markets. We discussed benchmarking against global standards, right? This is a question I like to pose to both of you all. How critical is it to attract talent and retain them? Because for services as well as manufacturing, you need talent and to grow, to innovate. I know there is a scarcity of talent at the moment in the country. And what more do we need to do?
I honestly think that it's probably the most important factor, and probably for as a country, this is probably where we fail like maybe 97%. The reality is that, sometimes we seem to be happy to send people out of the country and do menial jobs and send $200 back, and we think that's a great achievement, right? And I think so. When you talk about talent, producing global talent, empowering them, giving them the freedom to think, improving our culture of work, right? Making sure that there is an education system that actually, builds cutting edge talent. This is probably the foundation of, global competitiveness. There's nothing else, frankly, right? Because if you're putting people who are, you know, afraid to work, afraid to think, and we, if you look at the last 3 years, like you said, because we as industrymen failed, right, and we as countrymen also failed, lots of amazingly bright people are washing dishes in other countries, right? It's an insult to, frankly, how well we did.
Yeah.
Right. And I think so, every generation has to do more for the next generation. Right. And I think it's okay. But at the same, so I think if as leadership of organizations and country, I think we need to be fairly hard-nosed about grooming talent. I think work ethic is hard to find, right? We need to teach people on the job. We need to teach people how to be good leaders. We need to teach people to how to take risk. And as these organizations do better, we need to channel some of these funds to build ecosystems, universities, and capabilities that are building the next generation of talent and the next generation of learning systems. And without that, there is really no chance. There is really no chance. If look at everything that we're talking about, show me one business. Like I said, the world is getting highly polarized. Apple is 3 trillion, right? As a country, we are 80 billion. Elon Musk is over 200 billion. So, we're trying to fight the world with sticks and stones.
Yeah.
Right. So how are we going to build anything better? We better build people, with the right brains. But also don't think if we've done enough global business to know that knowledge is also not enough. Work ethic is important.
Yeah.
Right. It's smart. Saying smart work is not enough. Smart work has to be coupled with a good work ethic, and if you do smart work longer, you get even bigger results.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm willing to take a challenge. If you look at countries that are really making advances, these countries also have a great work ethic. There are people who are working harder. There are leaders who are working harder. There are great education systems that are producing talent, and they're getting more out of there, right? And so to sit here and think of our little portfolio of industries and think that, projecting that 10% into the future is good enough for this country to do well, not going to happen. Sorry. Yeah.
Maybe Nisha?
I fully agree with what Dilan said, Rajendra. See, for us, our raw material is hard, right? So that's what we have been focusing continuously. Even if I talk about SLASSCOM, we have been focusing continuously on our talent. And when you say talent, it's not only the quantity, right? It's also the quality of talent, right? Especially in the IT industry, as you know, it's evolving day by day, right? So things are changing. There's a lot of new technologies that are coming up, so you need to upskill, reskill the talent, right? So it's not only quantity, it's also the quality of your talent, and that is something that we really need to focus. We are blessed with good quality talent. It's how you really harness what you have, and then upskill them, expose them into especially when I say export industry, right? Expose them into different geographies, how you kind of work with others, so it's one is technical, then the other one is your soft skills and the life skills and all that, right? So everything comes into play. So I fully agree with Dilan. Talent is the most important thing that we need to focus on.
Agreed. Right. So Nisha, moving on. As a chairman of SLASSCOM, how do you describe the current state of the industry? Why is the sector critical for boosting exports?
Yeah. So Rajendra, IT and BPM industry is not a 100-year-old sector. However, over the last decade or so, it has grown to become a key sector for the countries. Today, Sri Lanka powers some of the world's top brands. If you look at eBay, is the middleware is powered by Sri Lankan software. London Stock Exchange, their trading platform, the development, and it's powered by Sri Lankan software. US military or other militaries, they for their training, and the simulation software is done in Sri Lanka. There are multinational companies who have invested the R&D centers, research and development and innovation centers in Sri Lanka. If I just give you some examples, IFS, 2,500 of their workforce, the entire IFS R&D center operates in Sri Lanka. Cisco is the largest world's largest food delivery organization. Their innovation center, their product development center is in Sri Lanka. There are global giants who are either acquiring or investing in Sri Lankan, world-class Sri Lankan products. A.T. Kearney, the analyst organization, they once described Sri Lanka to be a hidden gem, right? So whenever I get the opportunity to speak to some of these global CEOs and boards when they come down to Sri Lanka, they always praise, our talent. They love the country. So currently we have 140,000 plus workforce working in this industry, contributing significantly to the national economy. And if you consider the local value addition, it's about 70% to 80%. So what that means is, if you earn $100, $70 or $80 actually is retained in the country, because you don't have that many imports, in the IT BPM industry. It's maybe a few, computers or hardware, and then some software, maybe your cloud subscriptions, which you need to pay for. So with this industry is one of the key export revenue earners for the country. But having said that, we cannot rest on our laurels. Why I'm saying that is because of two reasons. One is because there's immense opportunity, vast opportunity, out there that we can tap into. If you look at India, for example, the IT industry is, the export industry is about $250 billion, and we are talking about 1.8 billion at the moment and aspiring to become a $5 billion industry. So we are just scratching the surface, right? So there's vast potential out there which we have to tap into. And globally, the demand for IT is growing. So that's on one hand. Then on the other hand, there are challenges that currently we are facing, which could impede our growth trajectory. We have lost a significant portion of our mid-tier talent due to brain drain, if you look at the last 18 months or so. Because of the economic crisis, there's still a negative perception about the country, which we need to, do something about it and brand our country. There's a rise in cost of doing business, sharp rise in cost of doing business. And if the proposed removal of the corporate income tax exemption gets, if that gets removed, that could also undermine the competitiveness of the industry. So we need to basically, focus on those things. So the industry has vast potential and opportunity, but at the same time, you need to work on the challenges that we have. And then when it comes to policy making, you need to be careful how you navigate is.
True. Thanks, Isha. So Dilan, coming back to you, right? Your journey, your entrepreneurial journey rather, has been truly inspiring. You've transformed an entity from $0 to $300 million global business in such a short time. Can you sort of share and inspire us as to what your key strategies have been for this accelerated growth?
Let me start by saying thank you. I think, honestly, the world doesn't need, and I repeat, another supplier doing yesterday's product. So when I think a few of us got together, it's important to say this first. Firstly, we were passionate about what we do. We still are. I think that is I mean, talk a lot more technical detail about it. And I think the reality of it is that, when I first, since we talk about exporting, when I first read a book on exporting, I still remember one of the simple lesson I learned is, you can't export what you're not good at in the home market, right? No one wants to, most companies fail in their home market and think, oh, why don't I just, export a few more units, right? No one wants to buy a weakness, right? If you as a consumer want to buy a better product, a better strength. So I think the first thing for us is as a team, as a unit, was to have a vision of where markets are going to be in the future. What advantage do we think we can build, right? And being extremely, and I say that this because you go through the paces every morning when you're a young company with no resources and the low power in the supply chain sense. And it's very important to be clear where you're going, what product solution are you going to go, and all of this stuff. Then I get specific and you do give the specifics because every day you're going to be faced with challenges, and you need to know your source of strength. You need to know, every day when you get distracted by challenges, one eye has to be on culture when you're solving today. How we did it. So for our own part of it is that I think for us, this is like I said, this industry in a particular sense has stopped evolving 40 years away, right? If you go back to a factory 100 years ago, right? Essentially, most of the technologies we speak of today, we look at all of us wearing shorts. We almost all of this, including the knitted fabrics to the woven fabrics to the jackets, where 98% of what we wear today existed 100 years ago, right? The needles moved slower, the technology was better, different, but essentially more or less. So what we've done is we've globalized it. We've improved industrialization, productivity, reduced unit costs, and outsourcing essentially disconnected the customer with the maker, right? So from our perspective, if you then look at any other industry which is vertical, whether you're making, TV since John Logie Baird did it or, cars, every other incumbent industry and added more technology, more features and created better value product, in our perspective, in terms of solving human lifestyle problems and we have. And so for us, the question was, how do we now build a platform and an organization that has the resources, talent, and ability to start solving these problems? We had short-term challenges and long-term ones. And the long-term or the short-term one was, how do we attract enough resources? So to be able to set up the infrastructure for this, how do we get the talent to do that? And then keep fighting giants in the game until you have the ability to actually do that. So I think from our perspective, we acquired a lot of companies that were not in great shape, so they were cheaper. But because we had enough talent, we inside those organizations and amongst ourselves to transform and restructure them, but restructure them and connect them to a stronger vision. Right? So we didn't restructure the companies purely looking for profit. Right? And we made many, many hard decisions along the way to, everybody. So I've got my colleagues from UK, right? And over there, when I first went there, the first thing that they said, we should close this down because we can't afford it. Now, we've been through the last 5 years has been the toughest for this industry ever, with COVID to, inventory crisis to global economic crisis to everything you face. I'm happy to say that we've sustained almost everything. We had to tighten our belts, we had to suffer, everybody had to suffer. But I think the team's been extremely creative in our ability to kind of offer new solutions to customers in a way that we've been able to continue to grow even in very oppressive and depressive circumstances, right? Because like I said, how do you fight big guys who already have every other machine that you had, plus a lot more, right? And so the journey's been tiring, but like Master, if you I would say the whole concept behind it, Rajendra, is we started out global. And I think that's the last piece that I would like to tell everyone. When we say export, it's a bit of a misnomer because we kind of assume where the moment you say export, it's like, I have to send everything from one corner. I think the new world is about global business model, right? What's your place in the world? What are you sorry? And you need global talent, right? You may start from your country of origin. And I think as a country also, we have to facilitate, individuals to think bigger, allow them to invest outside, attract talent from outside, frankly, go operate outside if you have to, right? And you can headquarter here, you can bring some of the dirt back and reinvest in our schools and bring talent for tomorrow. But I think the truly global companies that are, that are wealthy today, don't think about, when you say export, it's almost like we export Sri Lankan sweat and whatever, what we can dig out of the earth, right, for planting this. So it's very small-minded, right? And I think that's the real opportunity is to build young people who have big ideas of how to conquer the world and, take ideas from here and work with people around the world and build business models that can, solve global problems. Them small countries have opportunity to become, significantly more wealthy and offer a much better lifestyle to the kids that come after. And so for us, in our own small way, I think it's been a 24/7 job. We're thankful to the team from everywhere, frankly, whether it's Cambodia, whatever. I think we've not been perfect. We've sometimes run with two nuts off the wheel and 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 we survived it. But a lot of gratitude to the people who have worked hard to keep the tires on and always. I think from our perspective, we are in 7 countries. We have been able to embrace a lot of technologies. Our business model is 3 parts, since you asked. One, the primary part of it is new product and innovation. From a market segmentation perspective, we play in active and we play in integrates, right? And then the opportunity is to really offer our customers, how to think about the product portfolio tomorrow, right? And then being partnered with him and making sure that our talent is inspired to actually solve those problems. And by that solving those problems, our business should go. So I hope that made sense.
It did, we did. So thank you. Thank you for that. And it's great to see that despite all the challenges, that your guys are growing and multicultural and multi-diverse, and that's amazing. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring the session to a close. Thank you for joining us on this session of Market Vibes. Thank you, Dilan and Nishan, for joining us as well. Thank you, InQube Global, for hosting us and giving us the space to have the session. Thank you, everybody, and see you in the next episode.